The Holy Gospel according to Mark, the first chapter. As soon as Jesus and the disciples left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also. For this is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. The Gospel of the Lord. Weariness. That's kind of the feeling I think people have. People are just weary. It's almost been a year since we first went into lockdown to handle the COVID pandemic. We said that if we did it now, we would flatten the curve, and we did, and then the curve unflattened again, and we're just really tired. We can hear it in the voices of people as they're pleading for opening up of restaurants and the opportunity to play sports and to come back into worship spaces. We can read it in the sort of tense moments of Facebook conversations among people, which may actually not be called conversations, but they're really there. There's an ennui about stuff. There are people just really worn out. And not just of COVID, but of the political shenanigans that seem to be going on, of illnesses other than COVID which affect us, of the uncertainty of our economy and when it will turn around and how it works well for some and not for others. And then the weariness of trying to figure out how to get my COVID vaccine and where to sign up and who's going to prevent it. It's just wearing us down. It's been a long 11 months and we're tired. But if you think that we've had a long journey, consider the position of the people who heard Isaiah proclaim to them. They had been in exile in Babylon, away from their home, away from all that they believed to be theirs for 70 years. 70 years. And during that time, they had become somewhat settled into this place. And the truth of the matter is that all those who pined for the homeland as the place from which they came had probably died. And the ones who were listening to Isaiah and the promises that Isaiah was making were their children, who'd only heard about how wonderful it used to be back home, but now they're here. And so as Isaiah begins to speak about God's liberation, a word that we hear as good news, they're probably shaking their heads saying, "Yeah, we've heard all this before." The doubters figured that God wasn't going to do anything. The realists said, we just have to live with the situation as it is. Many probably didn't even want to go back to a place that wasn't their home. This was their place. Being sent back would not feel like a good thing. So Isaiah has to work diligently with them, speak clearly to them, to help them recognize that even in the midst of their weariness, their tiredness of being in exile, that God has been with them all along. If they would just look around, open their eyes, they would see the presence and the power of God at work. Look at the creation and all that it brings. Look at the people around you and the way that you care for one another. All is there. Do not grow weary. Do not wear out. Be faithful, for the Lord has come with strength for the weary and power for the faint, to raise us up and to experience once again the life he has for But even with the return from exile, weariness doesn't really leave the Israelites. By the time that Jesus arrives on the scene, some 500 or 600 years later, the Israelites have been a possession of some foreign power, be it the Persians or the Greeks or the Romans. Somebody has been their overlord. And that wears on you, when for all that time you have not been the free people that your scriptures say you ought to be, that your teachers say God had promised you when he brought you up out of the land of Egypt. And so they are weary. And more than weary at political stuff, they're weary about their own situations. And along comes Jesus, who breaks into their midst with words they haven't heard, with power they haven't seen, and suddenly they perceive here one who will bring strength to them, who will bring new life to them, who will bring hope to them. And so in that village of Capernaum, in the evening of the day when he made his proclamation in the synagogue and cast out the demon from Crazy Eddie, he was at the home of Simon and Andrew, took care of Simon's mother-in-law, and before you knew it, everyone in town was coming to take care of their weariness, of their diseases, of their pains, of their afflictions, of their possessions. Everyone was coming to Jesus because they were weary and he could provide them strength. This is our hope. In the midst of all that goes on around us, in the midst of those moments when we feel like it's just too much and we just can't go on anymore, we're invited to look around and to see the power of God still creating in our midst. The sun, the moon, the snow, the rain, all the ways that God appears to us in the natural world that is there. And then to see God in the communities which provide care and support for the most vulnerable, even in times like this. For the folks who come by our church on Thursday evenings to get a hot meal, numbering about 150 every week. Or those who find their way to the Salvation Army to receive a feeding from them. Or those who come together on Zoom to provide support for each other in times of their own crises. God is still with us. God is still present to us, even though we may be weary. Trust in the Lord in the midst of it all and experience from him the strength and the power to live through this to the new day that is soon to come.